Hi, I'm Mary Kathleen Mehuron. Folks around here call me Kathy, and this is Take Me Back, the interviews. The Take Me Back project has grown from a few articles to a column to a 501c3 nonprofit, and we have a book coming out to raise money for projects that showcase the history of the Mad River Valley. I am currently obsessed with what I call the historic families of the Mad River Valley. And I've been in touch with and collaborating on written pieces with Steve Joslin, who is here with us today. Hey, Steve.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And it's just wonderful that you're one of the early guests, and we're trying to figure out this show together.
So we're guinea pigs.
We're both guinea pigs. We went through some terrific photo albums with Steve, and I think where we want to begin is his birth. You were born in Waitsfield. No.
I was actually born in Burlington, but raised in Waitsfield. I was born at the old Mary Fletcher Hospital in Burlington, but my folks lived in Waitsfield.
Okay, and where did they live?
They lived on Bridge Street, the little brick house on the right that is across now from the Miramar Ski Club. That was their first home that they bought in 1941.
And what was Bridge Street like then, when you were very young?
Very young. My father still owned the grist mill, which is where the Miramar is now. My father had a combine and tractor and harvested. Back then, the farmers in the valley grew a lot of their own grains. My father had a combine and harvested the grain. It was harvested and put in 100-pound bags, brought down to the grist mill that he owned with his mother, and he processed it into feed for cattle and horses. It burned in 1944. That and Paul Moriarty's sawmill, which was directly behind it. Mm-hmm. And when they rebuilt the mill, it was rebuilt strictly as a retail bagged grain store. And that's what I remember most is playing in the store.
How old would you say you were when the fire happened?
When the fire happened, I was 1.
Oh, so really young.
Yeah, because I was born in 43 and it burned in 44. And they rebuilt it. I don't know if it was rebuilt in 44 or 45. But before they opened, they had barn dances in the mill.
They did.
In the summer. Don Fields and the Playboys, who had a band from Waterbury, played there. And there was one other band, I can't think the name right now, but.
So when you said they had the store after it, they weren't doing the grinding anymore.
No.
They were just selling.
My father, after the mill was rebuilt, he then was getting grain processed from Blue Seal or wherever, and he was picking it up by truck at the rail station in Middlesex, and it was being trucked to the store in Waitsfield and stacked in there, and then he delivered the 100-pound bags to the farmers in Moortown, Warren, East Warren, and he also sold farm-all tractors and farm machinery.
So tell me, so you kind of grew up in that store.
Yeah.
What are your memories? Just for a minute, visualize just walking into it. What was it like?
You walked in, and what would be the west end was the office. The rest of it was one huge room where grain was stacked according to whatever grain it was. And it was a great place to ride my tricycle because the floor had been worn smooth by the grain bags, and there was always spilled grain. So the floor was kind of slippery, and we could skid and spin around on our tricycles.
Did it have a scent? Did the grain have a scent?
Yes, it had there was all sorts of scents in there due to the, I remember that the horse feed had a lot of molasses in it, and you could smell the molasses. And in the office, there was a counter, and my father, somebody was always in the office and wanting to arm wrestle my dad.
Why was he a famous arm wrestler?
I don't know that he was famous, but I don't ever remember seeing him lose.
Really?
But something sticks in my mind that I can see him now with his elbow on the
Remind me
counter.
what his first name was?
His first name is Ryford.
Ryford?
Riford.
Joslin.
Joslin. His middle name was Stephen.
Something that you're opening up for me, I have tried to master what downtown was. You know, the old Mehurons with the Mehuron family living upstairs, the bank in the basement of the library. It never occurred to me that there would be business on the other side of the bridge.
There was my father's mill and Paul Moriarty's mill. And originally they were powered by water
So
from the dam.
What was traffic like? You had trucks coming and going, I would think.
Yeah, Bridge Street when I was very young was dirt. It used to get dusty.
Yeah.
My father had a 10-wheel truck that was used to deliver the grain. He also had a pickup truck. And in the summer, he would go to Bonet's garage and any other garage and collect their used motor oil. And he arranged or constructed a pipe across the back of the truck with holes in it, and he used to oil the road from the bridge
No kidding.
up through to where it splits into the East Warren Road.
Oil the road to keep the dust
down. And not sure that you could do it today, but it was effective then.
Now, I know Elmer Mehuron, my husband's grandfather, did have a store in the Blue Building, in where Peasant used to be, for a year, and then he sold it to Bisbee's.
Okay.
And they then moved down to where the Artisans Gallery is.
Right.
Right? And do you remember the Bisbee's?
Doc Bisbee and I he was a mentor of mine, so I had a very close relationship with Doc.
How so? What was he interested in you for? He must have seen something.
I'm not sure how the relationship developed. I've got a sneaking suspicion that my parents had something to do with getting me under Doc's wing. But we used to go up to the Shea place. That's where I learned to cook on a wood stove. I learned how to feed a wood stove for heat, and Doc and I used to spend time up there. And I was in the Boy Scouts for a little while, and he was active in the Boy Scouts, but learned an awful lot of old stuff from Doc.
Now, if I remember correctly, Doc Bisbee was not a doctor.
No, I'm not sure where that came from, but his wife was a Joslin, so, but that, the old families in town, there's a lot of interrelations there. I mean, most everybody was in some way related to everybody else.
Well, I see that as I'm doing research, that you don't have to go back that far, even in the 60s.
I mean, the Bairds, the Joslins, the Kingsburys, Staffords, you go back and there's...
The Hartshorns.
there's somewhere you come back to each other.
Yeah.
But Doc, I spent a lot of time with Doc. And of course the store was a neat place to hang out around the double-barrel stove.
The store meaning Mehuron's?
No, the hardware store.
Oh, and I believe they called it the tin shop at that time. I'm just throwing that
It
in because
was.
it's something
I always knew
learned.
it as Bisbee's Hardware, but his son Bob had a sheet metal shop in the back.
Okay.
I took my horse in the store one time.
How?
Doc had a soft drink machine in the right rear corner of the
Okay.
store. And my horse Rex liked orange soda. And I used to hang out on the porch. I'd ride down there with the horse and sit on the porch and talk and everything else. And I don't know how it happened, but the front door was open and I took the reins and led Rex in the front door and down the right aisle and got a orange soda out of the cooler, came up the back aisle and around and down and out the door as Doc was hollering at me. And Rex had his orange soda on the front porch.
This is something I'm learning a lot about, are the animals. I didn't realize horses could drink soda, but then Troy Kingsbury gave me a whole story about his pet raccoon who he took to get creamies.
Yeah, well, that I can, yeah.
And Pearl Vargas remembers the raccoon was named Dusty.
Well, the orange soda was sweet and
horses like sweet. I guess.
sweets. And if you put the bottle in back where his bit would go, back where there were no teeth, you could just hold it up and pour it in. And then he had orange froth all over his mouth, but but that's one of.
What a wild image! I'm just picturing you. So coming from the brick house on the right, coming down.
Well, by then
riding.
I lived up. We'd moved into my grandparents' house on Mill Hill, the White House above Miramar, and that's where I had the horse. But
there was a barn in back. Is there still a barn?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Is that up as far as the old Pestle farm?
No, it's the house that doesn't have a porch.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It looks, well, it doesn't look good anymore. But anyway, so that's where we lived then.
And you lived there from what age to what age?
Moved up there when I was 5 and lived there until I was 14 or 15.
All right. So, one of the ways that we've gotten to know each other is my recent obsession with the Waitsfield High School. And we call it the old high school.
Yep.
But I'm very curious what grade you were actually there, because a lot of history happened in that building.
I went there through the 8th grade. And then
you didn't have kindergarten, right?
Not then, no.
But 1st to 8th?
1st to 8th, and then I went to Montpelier High School.
Oh, you did? How come?
Because I would have had Dear Mom for 4 years of English, 4 years of math, and 4 years of Latin.
Yeah.
And that.
So what Steve's pointing out is his mother was a very well-respected teacher, highly educated, which kind of blew me away that she went to Boston University as a woman in that day and age. And she must have been just wicked smart. Others remember her really fondly. So she didn't want you to have her as a teacher.
Right. I think that she knew that it would be a very difficult situation.
It's hard enough to be a teenager.
Right.
But how did you do that? Did you stay with a family?
No, I rode back and forth to Montpelier every day.
In what?
The first year I rode with Don Demas.
Okay.
Who was working at the Bailey feed mill in Montpelier. And I rode back and forth with him. And then the last 3 years I rode with Bob Lawless, who worked at National Life.
Yeah.
And so he would drop me off at Montpelier High School as he went to National Life.
What you're bringing something up for me is the more I dig in, the more I realize how committed many families were to education. They got, the information you've given me and Randy Graves and some others, a really broad education, which is surprising for a place so rural. What I wonder about is that level of commitment, that you had folks that were willing to give you a ride, that students at Waitsfield High School were given a home in town because they couldn't get back to Warren every day.
Yep.
It's like the whole community was
My
committed.
parents, of course, had to pay tuition for me to go to Montpelier, which
wonder
was
how
an
much
added.
that would have
I don't
been.
know. And then my senior year, my Montpelier High School had been trying to recruit my mother for a number of years. She did start to teach out there my senior year.
Okay.
So now I rode to school with Mom, which wasn't as long as the rides home with Mom, but due to scheduling, I ended up in her senior class for English. And me being a smartass, I went in and thought I would show the other students that I could get away with something, and I ended up in the front row for the rest of the year. But she
That's
had no
brutal.
but she had no choice.
Yeah.
If she hadn't controlled her son, she couldn't have controlled the class. But,
Yeah. It just strikes me. You were talking about Doc Bisbee being a mentor, and it was intentional. You're
Yes.
saying your parents spoke to him, and then
Well,
your education.
I am pretty sure that it wasn't that he just took me under his arm. I believe I may have been difficult at home at that point in my life.
And a caring adult steps in. Right now, I'm on the board of the Mad River Valley Mentoring Program, and an effort is being made to expand mentoring. So I'm really attuned to what you're telling me. Is that here's these several caring adults, even just giving you a ride back and forth. That's not always convenient for a grown-up to have to alter their schedule.
Yeah.
And they did it for you, for your future.
It seemed like that of course, I was raised by the greatest generation, and it seemed like there was an attitude that we didn't go to college, but you are going to college.
Oh, tell me about that.
There really wasn't, I never thought that I ever had any choice. Starting in the 8th grade with my paper route, part of the money each week went into a savings account for college. And that's what I knew I was going to do.
And did you think about which colleges, or did it have to be UVM or?
No, back then, if you were a Vermonter and had a certain grade, you automatically could go to UVM, and that's how I ended up there.
That's cool.
Not knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah. What did you wind up majoring in?
History and political science, which gave me a bachelor's degree trained to do absolutely nothing.
But education is never wasted, because you did go on to have a career.
I think that the educational experience was what was important, not what I academically learned, but being able to adapt to and navigate and mature in those 4 years. I think that was the great thing that I got, because I never really used anything academically in my career, but it prepared me.
But it's all, it's learning how to do teamwork. It's
It's
all the skills that you get around problem solving.
and
They're
having
transferable.
to live day to day with people that you may not like or get along with, but
But you do,
you do,
because you're a professional.
and that carried on into when I got drafted into the Army. I was 4 years older than most everybody else, and I had been through a college atmosphere, which is groups and,
You have two stories. You have one that was just published in the Take Me Back column about coming back from Vietnam.
I did
And-
not go to Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
I went to Germany.
Germany.
Yes.
All right. Coming back from Germany. So I'm curious about that. What was it? I know you were drafted, and you make, what is the joke you make of it, that it wasn't optional? You got your...
Oh, I got an invitation. Yeah. The draft the draft notice that I got in the upper right-hand corner said your approval is not required.
Your approval is not required. That made me laugh out loud when I read it. So you came back. You were in Germany, what, 2 years?
I was in the Army for 2. I was in Germany for a year and a half.
So I just want to know, so you get the notice. I know you had to do your physical, and you went with one of the Jameson boys for the physical, right?
Had the physical first, and soon after that, Dave Jameson and I got our draft notice.
It's such a small town then, such a small circle of people. Was it exciting or was it terrifying?
This was 1965. We knew there was a Vietnam. We didn't know much about Vietnam. The government wasn't telling us anything about Vietnam. So I don't recall a fear of going to Vietnam because, Dave and I think, both went and talked to some reserve organizations, but they said you were making a commitment of 6 years of monthly meetings and everything else. And I think we both decided that we would go with the draft because we can stand most anything for 2 years.
Right.
So we went and waited for the invitation. But
And what did you do for the Army?
I was trained first in Morse code school, which is ancient history type communications, and then I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for radio teletype and cryptography, and I ended up in an artillery battalion where I was the communications truck for the nuclear artillery section, and I also worked in the message center with the cryptography, code work, communications. I had a NATO top secret clearance, and
What kind of brain do you have to have for cryptography? Mathematical?
no, I'm not good at math. When you first day that you're in basic, you take a whole day's worth of aptitude tests. They're Army aptitude tests.
Oh.
So when you're drafted, you don't have a choice of what you're going to do. The Army says you're going to drive truck, you're going to be infantry, whatever. How evidently I scored well enough in certain areas so that I qualified for teletype and cryptography.
So it's a placement. They
Yes,
place you.
yes. And so that I was fortunate that I went to Germany, and I was very fortunate to have been trained to do the job that I did. It was an interesting job and had some benefits that some other jobs didn't.
So this was 65. So you came home in 67.
In September of 67.
And one thing that struck me in our correspondence again is you do describe the valley had changed a lot. Tell us how.
There were different people here. I think that was the main thing, is that there were a lot of people here that we didn't know that were doing what we used to do.
How do you mean we're doing what you used to do?
Well, they were working at the mountain. They were jobs that Dave and I did were now being done by somebody else. The crowds at Gallagher's and the Bluetooths, we didn't know that many there now.
Would you describe them as ski bums? Or was it's not that easy to pinpoint?
It's not that easy to pinpoint. Some were ski bums, and some of the skiers, the weekend crowds had, there were a lot of faces that we didn't know. When you worked at Mad River, you probably knew most everybody that came up the lift by name. And we came back and there were people here we didn't know
In just 2 years' time.
in just 2 years' time.
But there was that original, I'm thinking the dates in my head. 65 was a real pivotal year for certain groups coming in. Randy Graves tells this wonderful story about the first time he saw somebody on Bridge Street that his dad didn't know. And it stuck with him. And he calls them people from away.
Yeah.
And there were waves of groups, whether it be ski bums or the Architects in Warren. I mean, there were certain groups that came together. And it happened fast, I guess. So
Yeah.
when you were working at Mad River Glen, when you left, right?
I worked there for 9 winters when I was in school. It was never a full-time job. I worked winters. I worked there one summer when I helped build the first double. But when I left, I was still the groundskeeper at the Bundy Art Gallery.
Oh, wow.
My mother was, by then, she was the administrator of the Bundy Art Gallery, and I was the groundskeeper there for 4 summers, I think. So I was working there when I left for the Army.
So your mother was teaching and
No,
she was done with teaching?
Yeah, when Harlow Carpenter opened the Bundy Art Gallery, he hired my mom to be the administrator of it.
So, it's making me smile because I know the name Harlow Carpenter. The fact you actually got to meet him.
Oh, I worked for him for 4 or 5 years.
I mean, I don't know the last time you've been up there, but it is every bit as beautiful.
I've been up a few times to meet the new owners
Yeah.
and have taken my mother. She had collected quite a few brochures from the shows that were at the art gallery, and I ended up with them. And so I took them out to give them to the Andersons. And yes, they have brought it back because it got pretty sad up there.
But they are wonderful people and good stewards.
Yes, they
of
are.
A beautiful structure.
Yes,
So
they are.
Your mother, she had many talents. Was art history a guilty pleasure of hers that she got to?
I'm not sure, but her mind was very inquisitive and very open. And when the art gallery closed and it became the Bundy School, then she was the administrator of the Bundy School.
Tell me about the Bundy School.
Harlow had 2 young kids, and I'm not sure the motivation, but he wanted a private school for them to go to, and so he turned the Bundy Art Gallery into the Bundy School, hired a teaching staff, and I think the school was maybe from 1st grade to maybe 8th at the most, and a lot of...
How many children do you think were educated there?
I'm not sure. Do you know Ginny Roth?
I do.
She would be a good source for that.
Did she teach there?
No, but her kids went there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, and she would have, I think, more specific information about the school than I do, other than my mom being there. And yeah.
I did. This is news to me. The Bundy School. Fantastic.
Yep. And I mowed lawns and pulled weeds. But Harlow was a wonderful person.
Was he? I'm glad to hear that.
I don't know how wealthy he was. He was very wealthy, but you wouldn't know it to meet him. He did a lot for the town.
That often happens, though. I'm just watching our time to see if we don't go too long. So, Okay, Bundy School. That's a big news item for me today. Back to, so you come home from Germany, got new people in town. I'm guessing that has a lot to do with not only Mad River Glen, but also the opening of Sugarbush. And then what year did Glen Ellen open?
Sugarbush opened in 58. I'm thinking Glen Ellen, early 60s.
63
I
maybe?
that sounds right, but
Right.
I don't remember.
So that's the timing there. You're leaving at that 1965 pivotal moment where people are like, hey, let's go live in the country and see what it's like. And we can ski.
Yeah.
And then you come home and they have usurped the jobs, basically.
I don't want to say that, but there were enough new faces. And I think maybe the cover charge had gone up at Gallagher's too.
To how much?
I don't remember, but that summer of '65, I mean, we were in there every night they were open, and we didn't have to pay anything. But come the winter of '67, and
You had to pay to get in.
had to pay to get in.
That's something that jumped out of your writing for me, too, is that there were so many places that had live music.
This place had restaurants, the bars were open. Like I said, Gallagher's and the Tooth had bands every single weekend. And I think Gallagher sometimes had a band on Wednesday night. Yeah, it was.
So you brought up the Bluetooth, and I have to ask, because Charlie Brown was a friend of mine. Charlie came in '65. Did you know him if you were frequenting the Bluetooth?
I know who he was.
Yeah. Okay.
I knew who he was. I knew Buddy Sherman, who owned Gallagher's. Because Gallagher's was, 100 yards down the road from where we lived at that time.
Right. Right down Route 17. You were at the base of Hill Number 9?
No, that was the LSD. I never lived there. I lived in the White House by my parents moved to Irisville in 1958. We lived between the store and the den, that White House between the store and the den. And that's where we lived, and my father had the woodworking shop there.
That must have been a nice place to live.
It was. So it was walking distance from there.
Stumbling distance.
It was, yeah. It was crawling distance back from Gallagher's, yes. I spent more time at Gallagher's than I did at the Tooth, but I remember some great bands like the Beachcombers, who were composed of classmates of mine from Montpelier High School.
Oh, all right, now I get it. When you talked about them being classmates, I didn't know yet that you were in high school in Montpelier.
Okay.
Now it makes sense to me.
Yep.
So that's your world converging, your schoolmates and the music scene in Waitsfield.
Yeah. But no, Waitsfield, you had a lot of places to eat and a lot of places to have a beer.
Do you remember, because it is a fascinating time for everybody, the whole Mascara Mountain thing where you had celebrities coming and models and so forth. And it seems, I heard a story about Delbert Palmer, who was the head meat cutter at Mehuron's for a long time. People would invite him to these parties because he made a special effort to get them whatever, T-bone steaks or whatever it is they wanted for their party. And they'd invite him and mingle with celebrities. Did you ever have an experience like that?
I remember one time, I only skied at Sugarbush once.
Interesting.
It was in high school. My cousin Peter, I'm not sure if Bonnie Yaley was with us or not. There were 3 or 4 of us. We went to Sugarbush. And I don't know what trail we came down, but we were skiing fast. And there was, I believe, maybe Peter Eston was the ski school instructor, and his wife was skiing with a group of very well-heeled women. And we came down, and I don't know if we skied through the middle or by the time we got to the bottom, somebody was waiting there, and Peter Eston's wife had reported us, and we were escorted. We were told to leave Sugarbush.
For just being wild boys.
Yeah, so I only skied there once, but after I got out of the Army, I worked for 2 years for Bob Harris as a carpenter, and I'm trying to think. Skitch Henderson had a chalet at Sugarbush,
Yeah.
and somebody broke a bunk bed in his house, and Bob Harris asked me if I would go up and fix the bunk bed in Skitch Henderson's house. So I didn't meet Skitch Henderson, but I repaired
But
the
you were
bunk
at his
bed.
house. Just
I
for,
repaired a bunk bed in Skitch Henderson's house.
for listeners who don't know who Skitch Henderson is, he was a very famous band leader of the time, was on television every week, and
On the Johnny Carson show.
on The Tonight Show,
Yes,
right?
yes, he was the band leader. No, yes. No, I'm sorry.
I don't
I'm
think
getting
Johnny
him,
Carson had it yet, though.
I'm getting him convinced with the other.
Doc Severinsen.
Yeah, Doc Severinsen, yes.
But he was a very famous
Yes,
musician.
yes.
And apparently he came almost every weekend. He loved to ski, and he loved the Mad River Valley.
Yeah, the Orsini's from New York were there from Orsini's restaurant, and well, there was Kim Novak. Yeah, there was in its early days, it had that reputation.
That cachet. It was very,
Yes.
very glamorous for the time.
Yes, Mascara Mountain,
Yeah.
but
So, as we're feeling our way here, I'm hoping you're going to come back and do some more episodes with us.
whenever we can.
There's so much to talk about, and so, to be able to go through your photo albums and really get an idea where we want to head after today. But I thank you for coming today.
I've had
And
fun.
thanks all who are listening to us at Take Me Back, the interviews. And we're going to call this episode number 2, and I'll see you again soon.
I hope so.
Take care.